this is genuinely terrifying. Yes, J.K. Rowling has said a lot of horrific things in the past, but this? This is an escalation in an order of magnitude. To openly praise someone for declaring trans people a quote, civilization-ending concept, end quote, shows that any pretense of civility is gone. Because if trans people are a civilization-ending concept, then what, pray tell, is the solution that saves civilization? This affirmation is, to me, as brazen as signing off on the 14 words, something I feel everyone should be screaming to the rooftops about, as we'll unpack in this video. But first, a quick content warning for the following: transmisia, anti-Semitism, fascism, and the Holocaust. If our work has helped you, please consider supporting us via Patreon so that we can keep the channel running. We cannot survive without your support. You can also help us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. I'd also just like to take this time to remind our viewers that the statements made throughout our videos are the opinions of myself, the host, based on the evidence I have available to me. They are not and should not be taken as unquestionable fact, which is why we reference everything, because we're valuable. Thus, we try to give you, the viewer, the ability to check all evidence yourself in order to make up your own mind, which is what the reference numbers in the top left corner are for, being numbers that match up with the reference list found in the transcript linked down below. As such, we encourage all viewers to do their own research to reach an informed conclusion about the topic. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and we need to talk about J.K. Rowling affirming the assertion that, quote, trans is a civilization-ending concept, end quote. We'll also be unpacking the source of said assertion and how it confirms what I and a few other trans people have been saying about gender-critical fascism, previously the TERF movement, for almost a decade at this point. But let's start by breaking down exactly what happened. This whole thing began when Rowling quote tweeted a post by the LGBT Courage Coalition containing a video of a testimony by Jamie Reed, sometimes referred to as Jamie Whistleblower. In her response, Rowling asserted that, quote, every single person who supports, normalizes, justifies, and celebrates child transition should be forced to listen to this woman. Never, ever claim you couldn't have known what you were so enthusiastically enabling. The evidence was right there in front of you. End quote. She is, of course, attacking gender-affirming care for children, promoting lies like those promoted in the pseudoscientific Cass review. The UK government recently banned said care, specifically puberty blockers, a ban that has been directly linked to eating disorders and suicide among transgender children, a fact we went over just the other day. Now, Reed saw Rowling's post and responded by quote tweeting, confessing that, quote, was recording our podcast discussing how trans is a civilization-ending concept while this happened. So grateful, end quote. So not even trying to be subtle in pretending like she's just talking about a portion of the trans community or certain aspects. Just trans, in its entirety, is a civilization-ending concept, to which Rowling responded, declaring that, quote, you're a heroine, kiss, end quote. There's two feelings that come with this. The first is vindication. I have spent a lot of time pointing out the fascism inherent to gender-critical ideology, constantly rebuffing attempts to claim that it was ever feminist and has merely been hijacked by fascists in recent years. I'm sorry. You don't fucking sleepwalk into full-blown fascism, and that idea needs to be strangled to death. Gender-critical ideology was always fascist, even when it was still walking around as trans-exclusionary radical feminism, and I am so sick and tired of hearing people who had previously told me to shut the fuck up and stop being so alarmist now change their tune in claiming that there was never any way anyone could have known. But hey, at least we now have it out in the open. nobody can look at that interaction and honestly see anything other than an attempt to frame trans people in a way intended to justify their extermination. Which leads me on to the second feeling, which is abject horror. Why? Well, because Rowling feels comfortable enough signing off on posts explicitly asserting that trans people are a civilization-ending concept. There is literally nothing else in that post for Rowling to be calling Reed a heroine over, just the statement that trans people are a civilization-ending threat. And that is it. That is quite literally all Rowling has to point to as she glorifies the person making said statement. Not defend, not merely support, but straight up praises them for it. Though I say horror and not surprise. Why? Well, because again, the gender critical movement was always fascist. It has always presented trans people as part of a globalist conspiracy. That's fascist code for Jewish people, by the way, intent on destroying white Western civilization via their degeneracy, as covered in our recent video, exposing the fascism of gender-critical feminism. In that video, we unpack gender-critical fascism's core beliefs, compare them to a functioning definition of fascism, whilst also comparing the actions of the modern gender-critical movement to those of the Nazis of Nazi Germany. So do check that video out for specifics, it's all fully referenced, as always. Yet, returning to said post, Rowling is tapping into fascist anxieties when she showers Reed with praise for her frankly genocidal rhetoric. Because, let's stop to think for a second. When Reed calls the very concept and thus existence of trans people a civilization-ending concept, the implication here is that that's a bad thing and we should therefore put an end to it. Okay, put an end to it how? Well, since you can't stop a trans person from being trans any more than you can stop a cis person from being cis, the only way to get rid of the problem is full-on extermination. And even then, that's doomed to fail. Trans people have existed since the dawn of humanity and will persist so long as there are humans being born. But hey, that didn't stop the Nazis from giving it their best shot during the Holocaust. Because yes, trans people were one of the groups persecuted, specifically under the Pink Triangle, no matter how many times Rowling engages in what has been legally ruled as a denial of Nazi crimes in modern day Germany. Yet that is all I fucking see here. An assertion made in an attempt to manufacture public support for genocide, a message Rowling has signed off on as she called SS Officer Reed a fucking heroine. That is why I compare it to the 14 words, a slogan created by white supremacist David Lane, which declares, quote, "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children." End quote. Just like Rowling and Reed, the genocide isn't stated explicitly, but heavily implied. That's where Rowling is at this point, at least from my standpoint. She's signing off on genocidal rhetoric. Which is to say absolutely nothing of the fact that Reed is a well-documented liar. This is a fact we demonstrated all the way back in 2023 in our video debunking pseudoscience attacking trans youth regarding Sabine Hossenfelder. The plural of anecdote is not data. It's a statement to remind us that anecdotal evidence is very open to bias sampling, with the researcher seeking out certain narratives or even the people behind those narratives seeking them out for some personal gain, which often leads them to lie. Take for example Jamie Reed, a gender clinic whistleblower who had previously worked at the Washington University Transgender Center. Reed published an article in February of this year which was titled, "I thought I was saving trans kids, now I'm blowing the whistle," in which she claimed that, quote, "There are more than 100 pediatric gender clinics across the US. I worked at one. What's happening to children is morally and medically appalling." End quote. In her opening paragraph, she goes on to explain that, quote, "I have spent my professional life providing counselling to vulnerable populations, children in foster care, sexual minorities, the poor," end quote, which in this context implies that she played an active role in the children cared for at said gender clinic. This seeks to lend credence to her claims that there are no, quote, "formal protocols for treatment," end quote, and that children who, in Rhee's eyes, look to be a, quote, "manifestation or social contagion," end quote, that's code for showing symptoms of rapid onset gender dysphoria, were being handed prescriptions without scrutiny. Indeed, just like Hossenfelder, she asserts that, quote, "across the Western world, there began to be a dramatic increase in a new population. Teenage girls, many with no previous history of gender distress, suddenly declared they were transgender and demanded immediate treatment with testosterone," end quote. Wow, so we have a counsellor at a gender clinic speaking out about medical malpractice? That's pretty big. And the gender critical crowd certainly treated her as such, plastering her story everywhere, which, considering this is the only real case like this, is likely where Hossenfelder sourced her own vague claim. I can't say that for certain, but I do find it incredibly likely. There's just one problem. Reed was not in any medical or managerial role and wasn't present in the appointments where doctors saw patients. Her role was making appointments, doing patient intake, and informing families about additional resources. You know, a receptionist. Things only continue to get worse from there as more than 24 parents, that's over 24 people, stepped forward to talk to the press, completely contradicting Rhee's claims. For example, one boy, now 17, saw his therapist 89 times before he began testosterone. 89 times! So not only was Reed exposed as a charlatan in presenting herself as someone with a more active role in said children's care, but 24 parents decided to take time out of their day to get in contact with the press to explain that yes, there was protocol in place, Reed had just lied. It's almost like there's a reason that even qualitative studies follow certain rules when it comes to sampling. I just wanted to bring this up again in case people are wondering why I haven't bothered to show the testimony in question. Fascist lie. They do it all the time. That's just a fact of their Nazi nature. And I don't see any reason to help her spread Nazi lies. Yet that is precisely what Rowling is doing, promoting a known liar to her 14 million followers. Specifically someone who has made it her life's goal to use their lies to terrorize trans people, extending all the way to presenting us as a civilization-ending threat who should be shipped off on trains and gassed at the nearest concentration camp. And I am fucking sick and tired of pretending like that's not what they're trying to normalize here. People like Reed and Rowling can say the absolute worst things about the trans community, presenting us as a world-ending threat on par with climate change or nuclear exchange, yet we, as trans people, aren't even supposed to say the word fascist because it apparently turns people off. Well, fuck your respectability. If you refuse to acknowledge what Rowling is doing here, then you're as much a danger to trans people as those who sat by and did nothing in Nazi Germany as their friends were demonized and then rounded up. You either fight fascism or you serve it. Those are your only options. Make your choice. I know I've made mine. Though, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the exchange? Why do you think people are so much more adverse to claims of fascism than the fascism in their face? How do we overcome that problem? Did you notice something I missed? If so, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And if you appreciate what we do here and want to help keep us running, please consider becoming one of the wonderful patrons who make our work possible. You can also make a one-time donation via PayPal or Super Thanks on YouTube. On that note, we just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, God is a Lighter, Flynn, and Higgins the Seagull. And for myself, Aditya and Levi, take care now.